We're on the same side. When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past, about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice. I know, it's been a long while. I have been out scouring the world. Actually, I got a new computer. It took me some while to get used to the little conflabities and the confligles. My name is Walter. This is Draftvice. You could follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice _ on Instagram, _football on Instagram. And you can follow me at BROJO, Death is in the End of Life, punch like a delicious drink we drink in the summer. So today, we are coming upon free agency, right? This is one of my favorite times of year. It's like Christmas. I've been breaking down film, watching some draft prospects, been looking at the stats, been looking at some players, and today we are talking about a division. We'll be doing all the divisions. By the time free agency hits, we will be done. And today's division is the NFC North. If you read the title, if you saw the little flickers and the flackers on the sides, yes, we are talking about the Chicago Bears, the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers, and the Minnesota Vikings. So, without further ado, because I know this is why you came here, you came to listen to me talk about the football. So today, Walter, we'll be talking about the Bears. So let's start off with the Bears. The Bears made it to the playoffs. This was a shocker. They were the 7th seed team. They made it to the playoffs, and they did not play very well against the Saints. They played them on Nickelodeon. That was the best part about that game, is that it was on Nickelodeon. We got to hear Nate Burleson. By the way, Nate Burleson should be one of the people they should be looking at to do Monday Night Football. I'm just saying, he did amazingly well. I think they should start doing more things like that, more cross-platforming. It made it fun. I would like to see like a Cinemax version where you could have strippers go ahead and talk about the game, and you could have maybe like Stormy Daniels do Monday Night Football, or just a playoff game on Cinemax. Skinemax Raw Football. Anyway, let's move beyond that. We'll talk about the Bears, not that kind of Bears, the Chicago Bears. And this team was weird. Like I said, they were on the Nickelodeon. Mitch Trubisky won the MVP, the Nick VP award. Sean Payton got slimed. It might go down as Drew Brees' last win in the playoffs. Probably will, because it sounds like he's retiring. But we're not talking about the Saints right now. So let's talk about the Bears, right? They, cap space-wise, they're tight. They're tight. We've been talking about the cap crunch for a bit now. They're a little bit tight against the cap. As of right now, as of this recording, Spotrac has them at negative $2,827,000, $100,000. Anyway, they have them at about almost $3 million. How about that? We'll round up for the math people on this podcast. So negative $3 million. That's not great. Now that's assuming a $185 million cap, which might not be it. Now, there could be anywhere from, we already know it's at minimum 180, probably going to be at least 181. It could get up to 185. We were hearing maybe even 187, 188 with some of the rumblings, the rumors. We know there's TV deals going on. Those are going to be very sexy. But going into this, the Chicago Bears, right, they have a great defense, right? They drafted Jalen Johnson. He played pretty well last year. They got Eddie Jackson. He did not play as well as he usually does, but he played pretty solid. They're losing the former head coach of the Colts, Chuck Pagano, as D coordinator, but they still get to keep that fantabulous D-line of Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Akeem Hicks, maybe. We'll talk about Akeem Hicks later. But they're all getting older, man. They're getting older. They're getting up in those ages. Trubisky's a free agent. Don't think he's coming back. So they have Nick Foles as their only real option at quarterback. Keep in mind, for some reason, Spotrac still has Jimmy Graham on the roster. I thought they had already released him. I thought that was the rumor anyway. But Jimmy Graham will probably get released. That'll clear up about I believe $7 million in cap space. They already announced that Bobby Massey's option's is getting declined. I had it in my notes that it would be about a $6.7 million. I got that from Spotrac. So again, Spotrac, whatever you want to call it. All I know is recently reported it was about $5 million they're saving from declining his option. Bobby Massey, kind of a top 30 tackle-ish, but so not great. but not horrible. Probably a serviceable guy. I know they had some injuries this year, so again, the offensive line they had there, Jermaine Ifedi, I think, played a little bit for them. The only guy who played really solid was Cody Whitehair, their center. He's the only guy who you really feel like you can't get rid of. Charles Leno, they could also clear up a little bit of space if they cut him, probably save another $6 million. Cutting both your tackles is rough, though. Not having both your tackles back, yes, I get that they were towards the back end of the NFL as far as play goes, but they had again, losing both guys, having to find 2 new starters for your offensive line is already rough. And like I said, their cap situation, yes, some of that will clear it up. Those kind of moves will give you some cap space. But what are you getting cap space for? You don't even have a quarterback. Okay, you have Nick Foles, but does that really count? Does that really count? You saw them play with Nick Foles last year. He was not good. He has not been. He is a solid, high-end backup. He can win you a couple of games when he doesn't know he has to go into the game. When he knows he has to play for more than a couple of games and not steal somebody's job, then he goes ahead and he just was like, well, I just can't seem to throw the ball anywhere. I mean, I saw screen passes this year that were inaccurate. Like, come on. He is not I get it. He won a Super Bowl. Listen, Nick Foles, I root for him. I'm happy he won the Super Bowl. I'm happy he got paid doing these deals with the Jaguars and the Bears. He's also kind of hard to get rid of this year, so it makes it even weirder. Maybe they go for a guy in the draft. We'll go over our quarterback draft coverage and where I tend to land on some of these quarterbacks. I actually kind of like the class. It's a very solid class. I just think a lot of them are going to go really early. This is a good class, and I think a lot of the teams that are up on the top end, they might actually like some of these guys too. So, when we look at the Chicago Bears, what do we think? What do we think of Matt Nagy, right? Matt Nagy, he came in, had this kind of fortuitous persona around him. Everybody kind of thought he would be this great offensive play caller, was really good at scripting the first 15, the whole Andy Reid coaching tree thing. Came in, did pretty solid his first year, kind of made Mitch Trubisky look pretty good. And Mitch Trubisky had a couple of injuries, came back, did not look so hot. I think if you watch the game film that year, even that year, he did not look really great either. I think he got, it was a little bit more of the sticker shock, a good defense, being able to get a couple of points and be able to outscore some guys. That Bears defense is good. I don't know how much longer it's going to stay good. Like I said before, you get a lot of older guys on that roster. Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn are getting older. They could, outside of the guys I've listed so far, let me go back to this. Yeah, like I said, Jimmy Graham, Bobby Massey, Buster Skrine they already released. That probably got him a little bit close to the cap. They were in the running to trade for Carson Wentz. You saw I did some short videos on that stuff. They have Allen Robinson potentially going to become a free agent. There's rumors they might tag him. I don't think you have to have the cap space to tag somebody. That's $18 million in cap space they have to have. I don't think they have that. Even if you count all that money together, if you count the Akeem Hicks and Akeem Hicks they could release, that would save them about $10 million. They probably will actually restructure his contract because I think they would rather keep him than lose him. But Akeem Hicks would save about $10.5 million. That would get them money to do something. Between all those moves, what are you doing with that? You don't have a quarterback. They were really high in the trading for Carson Wentz market, or somewhat high. Because here's the thing. It was all rumors. We're not even sure they actually put in a real bid. We just know that the Colts eventually agreed to trading a third and a second-round pick that could be turned into a first-round pick if Carson Wentz essentially plays over 70% of snaps. We're not doing those. But again, that was... And there's a question as if that would have been a smart move by Pace and the Bears. I don't think so. Carson Wentz has worked really well when he's had things working right for him and things going around. And I don't even think Carson Wentz is bad, right? I'm not of the opinion that he's totally broken. My opinion is, how do you know how bad he is when nothing was working? It was a trash offensive line, all the receivers got hurt again. And so I don't think he would have been a bad pickup for them. But here's the problem. Chicago has the same problem. He might be an improvement on Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, but to what extent? Especially if you're losing Allen Robinson. So I think it's better off that they didn't get him. Allen Robinson will cost $18 million because he's on a contract already, and you have to pay if you're doing a franchise tag, it has to be 120% of the last contract. So I think that Allen Robinson's probably onto another team. I heard rumors of the tag and trade scenario. Dude, you got to realize when you tag and trade guys, it's not what that was not what the tag was for, but also they cannot sign the tag, in which case you can't trade them yet. So if you've used the tag, you have to allocate that cap space, and you can't sign anybody else until you figure it out. If your guy's getting traded or if he's going to go ahead and not sign it, and in which case that creates a little bit of a problem for the Bears. Defensively, like I said, the defense is set. I think this is, I just don't. I understood what the Bears were trying to do. I know Russell Wilson's been connected to them. Oh, Russell Wilson said he wants to go to the Bears if he's going to get traded. Listen, there's nothing the Bears can offer the Seattle Seahawks that would make them want to go ahead and trade Russell Wilson, right? Their first-round picks aren't that high. If they trade them Russell Wilson, they're not going to be any higher. Like, this is the highest it's gotten so far. They're picking 20. That defense is relatively good, unless you're getting players in return for that, like what, Khalil Mack? And in which case, I don't know what Seattle's plan would be going forward because you don't have a first-round pick next year. So, I don't know. I feel weird with the whole Chicago Bears thing. Let's talk some options, right? Options for the Bears I think they have really three needs. All offensive, right? Offensive line, they need tackles. Their tackles are not great. Actually, I think they also need guards. They literally only had one offensive lineman who played really well where you don't need a really replacement. I said that before, was Cody Whitehair. I was a little shocked that, I almost feel like they would have been better off going after guards, except, listen, it's going to be a weird year, especially when you're in this weird cap crunch. They had to get a little bit of space anyway. So with these moves that the Bears are doing or may do going forward into next week, they probably need to address offensive line either here or in the draft. If they're keeping Leno, at least they have one part of the offensive line shored up. I think the number one thing you have to talk about here is quarterbacks, right? Can they afford a new quarterback? Are they going to replace Nick Foles with somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick, and is that going to do anything? Can they trade for somebody? Marcus Mariota, we found out recently, Marcus Mariota's contract makes him a really good backup because he makes $10 million for the year, but he has so many incentives, it can go up to $17 million relatively easily. It means that trading for him as the starter might not really be great for your team. Now, you can hope that the Raiders cut him, realizing their deal kind of doesn't help them garner any assets, and they do need to clear space. Although the Raiders have been clearing tons of space. I mean, the funny thing with all the Raiders contracts is they were all really low guarantees and signing bonuses, they're like bonus structure and guarantees where they can get out of them within a year or two, mainly because the owner does not have a lot of money, and when you do high guarantee contracts, you have to put a certain amount of money in escrow, at least when they made these contracts up. I'm not quite sure under the new CBA's rules if that's still the case. That was actually the reason why the Raiders didn't extend Khalil Mack. Going back to the Bears, though, right? Great defense. Got to figure out quarterback. Also receiver, because you're losing Allen Robinson. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Anthony Miller. Big fan of Anthony Miller. Cole Kmet played pretty well this year for a rookie at tight end. Darnell Mooney has some excitement to him, some speed to him. But none of those guys are true big breakers, if you will. The hey, I want this guy on my team kind of guy. They might look to the draft for these positions, right? At least 2 out of the 3, I could see them going towards the draft. I could also see potential trades, like I said before. I could see an effort to go after Marcus Mariota, Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he's available. He's used to playing behind a messy offensive line to begin with. Outside of that, the number one thing I can think of, trade for Sam Darnold. That or Case Keenum if you're really in desperate straits and you don't like Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold's going to cost you $5 million this year, and if you give him the fifth-year option, it's a $15 million cost next year, or give or take. It might be a little bit more than that, probably around the $18 million cost. But either way, when you split it, it comes out to a relatively safe number for even if they don't do the fifth-year option and they just want to see him for this year. It gives you an option at a cheap discount, and you could trade a second-round pick and try to reaccumulate that through the draft. You can redistribute second-round pick value. You could find ways of getting that back, whether it's trade downs and things like that. So I think Sam Darnold would be one of the two teams that could benefit from getting Sam Darnold. The other option I can see for them is Case Keenum. Fitzpatrick sounds like he wants to go to a team. Maybe I don't know how cheap he's willing to go for. You still have issues as far as trying to get rid of Nick Foles, because again, as I look at this, Nick Foles' contract is heavy, right? It's $10 million dead cap if they cut him. So it accelerates. They're actually going to take on more cap, I believe, if they cut Nick Foles this year. So I don't see them getting rid of Nick Foles. I have to think their plan here is to go after, either they're going to stick with Nick Foles and go after somebody to bolster up the offensive line, the receiving core, something to make that team a little bit better. They're losing a couple of guys, but again, like I said before, the big one, Artie Burns didn't do anything for them. Allen Robinson's probably going to get a $20 million a year deal, and Mitch Trubisky will probably sign to be a backup somewhere, fringe starter, and somebody will take the flyer on him that's not the Bears. It seems like that situation has kind of flown the coop. Let's go on. Draft-wise, I could see them going I will do more in the draft. I could see them going a tackle in the draft in the first round with a Tevin Jenkins, if that guy is there, if Liam Eichenberg is there in the first round. I think I gave him to them in a mock draft. Another option I could see is Samuel Cosmi, that has been put up a couple of times. I think that's another name that people tend to flirt with. Alex Leatherwood of Alabama. All fringe first-rounders, high second-round guys, depending on where they are on your board. I don't have the big board up for you, and everybody's different. Everybody's board is different. Receiving-wise, there's a lot of intriguing names in this class as well. If you're looking for a first-round guy, Rashad Bateman's probably the guy who will probably be there in their vicinity. Although we've seen guys drop. Last year we saw CeeDee Lamb drop, so. Maybe Jalen Waddle drops because of the injury concerns. We saw it happen a couple of years ago with Calvin Ridley. People were like, "Oh, he's too old." His breakout age was really late. Maybe Devonta Smith doesn't garner the affection we think he's going to garner. Again, Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota, Rondale Moore out of Purdue, Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss. Those are guys who I'd be intrigued by, because if I'm Matt Nagy, what my plan is get a bunch of guys who are either fast or can win on the Rashad Bateman can win on the outside. Get guys who can win with the ball in their hands. Try to find ways of just trying to manufacture offense with these players, because you're going to probably get a low-end starter for this year unless you're drafting a quarterback, right? Honestly, if I'm the owner of this franchise, I don't think I want Ryan Pace to be in charge of this draft, because this feels a lot like last year's draft with the Lions, where if you let them go ahead and have free range with this draft, you were running the risk of it not panning out in your favor. They could trade up and trade away assets. I'm pretty sure the owners would have to clear that, though, with them if they were to take a quarterback. There are quarterbacks in this draft. There's been a lot of intriguing interest in the quarterbacks in this draft, right? Trey Lance might get there. Mac Jones initially probably thought to have been in that territory. Now it's starting to sound like he's going to be higher up. I'm not quite sure that's true. It sounds like one of those things that people say. I don't know, but we heard about Daniel Jones a couple of years ago. Nobody thought Daniel Jones at this point of the year, a few years ago, was going to be, a top 7, top 6 pick. So we could see it with Mac Jones. Kellen Mond was a name that Chris Sims put out there. That I don't hate the concept that Kellen Mond might be a fringe first rounder. I'm curious as to what team would take him, and if you're desperate, which the Bears tend to be, he could fit very well. He's more athletic than Trubisky was. He's got a decent arm. Showed pretty well at the Senior Bowl. If they're really lucky, Justin Fields falls, and maybe they trade up to get Justin Fields. He tends to be he's more athletic than the other. He's more athletic than Mond, I would say. Well, Mond, like I said before, is pretty athletic himself. Accurate as hell. I gotta say, Fields is really good. And Trey Lance, again, his athleticism is pretty impressive. My one issue with Trey Lance is his offense was. It was, people complain about the Kyle Shanahan outside zone scheme kind of thing. Well, there's some questions about that. Either way, if I'm them and I see those quarterbacks are in the catchable range, maybe I look and do it. I don't think I want Ryan Pace picking my quarterback, though. So I think I'd rather them draft. I'd rather not let Ryan Pace pick anybody because you're going to run the risk of destroying somebody's career relatively soon. Regardless, we'll move on to the next team on this list because the Bears are in a very weird, tight situation. Not to give up on the Bears. I think the Bears are a fun team. But my question here is are these the guys that lead you going forward? Maybe Nagy is. I don't hate Nagy. Sometimes the play calls get a little vanilla, and he doesn't really adjust very well. Although they did adjust a little bit towards the end of the year. Oh, granted, that was probably when the play calling kind of started getting distributed differently. With was it Zampese and DiFilippo? Or no, Bill Lazor and DiFilippo were kind of running bits and pieces of the offense. So let's move on. The Detroit Lions. New head coach, Dan Campbell. Matt Campbell's a totally different person. New head coach, Dan Campbell, comes in. He's got Anthony Lynn as his OC. He's got Deuce Staley to be his RB coach and his assistant head coach. They trade away Matt Stafford. They get 2 first-round picks and a Jared Goff as a kicker. I'm not saying he's a kicker. Anyway, they're drafting 7 overall. They just signed Tyrell Williams to a $6 million contract because Tyrell Williams was cut. Again, another Raider that's getting cut. I'm telling you, the Raiders are up to something. They're up to some deviousness. They restructured Jamie Collins' contract to create some salary cap space. He was on the books for $9 million in total cash this upcoming season. He's going to get that, but they added some voidable years onto his contract. His cap number of $11.3 million is going to be lowered. $7 million of that guaranteed money for 2021 comes from Collins' base salary. So they're restructuring his contract to kind of push stuff forward. Because of the Jared Goff trade, they're now projected to be at negative $3 million, $4 million with $185 million cap. They've already released Desmond Trufant, so at this point it's going to change a little bit. They're actually in trade talks about trading Chase Daniels. I don't know for what. I don't know why everybody likes Chase Daniels. He's a quarterback. He's a backup quarterback. I'd rather have a guy that – but I think if you're trying to develop a young guy who's in a very specific scheme, he might be a guy that some teams look at. They can release Danny Shelton and save $4 million. It sounds like they kind of want to keep some of these guys. They did release Christian Jones. They could also release Nick Williams and save another $4.7 million. So right now they're actually at $12 million. So those notes are from before they did the restructures and some releases. They can also release Justin Coleman and save about $5 million. Danny Shelton will save you $4 million. Nick Williams will save you another $4.7 million. Trufant did save them money. I know they had already released him. That's why they're up to $12 million partially as well. Between some of these releases, like Christian Jones and Jamie Collins' restructure. So now they're at $12 million. You need that kind of money to be able to draft some guys. Also, if they're looking to franchise tag Kenny Golladay, because they have 3 receivers leaving in free agency: Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and Danny Amendola. If they let Kenny Golladay leave, I guess they could just let him walk and see what contract he gets. There's been a lot of talk that he's going to get franchise tagged. I kind of buy that one because he's good. And to be honest, he's also relatively older. He's almost the same age as Allen Robinson. To think Allen Robinson's on his 3rd contract, pretty impressive. They could restructure some more guys. I don't know if they really are planning to do that. It sounds like they're more in trade mode. They could also, I think, cut Jesse James if they wanted to. Yeah, $2 million more in space if they cut Jesse James. So they got some more cap space maneuvering they can do. Let me talk about the hiring, right? I actually kind of like Dan Campbell. Some of what he says makes sense. Putting guys in the right space. He studied under on Sean Payton. He was an interim head coach a couple of years ago. Some of the things that I am seeing with his roster management, granted, he's coming along with his GM, whose name escapes me. God damn it! I'll get back to you. He's developing. I think I like what he's doing. Right, I said before, Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn was a solid OC, and in fact, the offense was pretty damn good in LA. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, I was one of the few people who was kind of a little, I think, squeamish on getting rid of Anthony Lynn. I'm just saying a little bit. But with that, I kind of like what Dan Campbell's doing with the coaching hires. They're keeping the offensive line coach. They already do have a very good offensive line, or at least a very solid offensive line. Ragnow's really good. Taylor Decker has been great for them. I'm very. I think it was Tyrol Crosby. They drafted a tackle a couple years ago in the late round. I know they last year signed Halapuli Fight Tie. He was pretty good last year. Not great, but solid. Maybe with him, it's weird because he's been like that like baseline guy. He's been a good backup. They signed him to a lot of money. I was kind of skeptical of that deal. The new GM, Brad Holmes, has been doing a lot of work, clearly, in this offseason. Again, he's very familiar with Jared Goff. Maybe I should talk a little bit about the Jared Goff trade. 2 first-round picks in the future. They did not get one for this year. They got a 3rd-rounder this year, along with Jared Goff, to trade away Matt Stafford. I think that's kind of a steal because, and I get it, some people are like, some people think that it's a steal for one team, a steal for another team. I think there's times where it's steals for both teams. There's sometimes where it's just good for both sides. Getting Jared Goff and 2 first-round picks, you may have a good quarterback on your roster now. You might be able to trade down the line anyway. If you could show that he can do something and then you want to draft somebody next year. You also have, like I said, 2 first-round picks going into the future, an extra 3rd-rounder this year. The major thing that screws you over on is cap space. I kind of like the Lions roster, though. Like I said, Halapuli Vaitai, they can't really cut him anyway. He's got a lot of guaranteed money. Justin Coleman they could cut, but he's been very solid for them. I just think they're overpaying for a slot corner, so I'm a little shocked they are keeping him. TJ Hawkinson, this is, I think, the chance where they can get TJ Hawkinson to work for them pretty well. Decker's been good for him. Jamie Collins, I already mentioned, they restructured his deal. I think they're going to try to find a way to get him to work for them. Maybe they trade Danny Shelton if it doesn't work out, or they don't think they want to keep him. They want to clear some extra space. I think it depends on what they think they can get out of the guys they have on the roster. D-tackle class is not great this year. I did mention Tyrol Crosby. I just wasn't sure that was actually his name because there's also there's a Crosby on the Raiders. Sometimes you get a little confused. Tyrol Crosby used to play for the Oregon Ducks. He was and he's actually played well when he's had to play. So I was a very big fan of that pick when they took him. He was a late round pick, and he's hung on to the roster. So they're losing they're losing Romeo Okwara. He's going as a free agent as well. They're losing a lot of guys. They drafted Julian Okwara last year. They still have Jelani Tavai. Like I said, I'm not a huge Danny Amendola fan, so I don't care that he's leaving. But Marvin Jones was a big player for them. They did mention Deandre Swift being a big part of this roster, wanting to utilize him, his ability to run routes, play in the slot. Dan Campbell has spoken about putting guys in the right spot to utilize them. They traded for Everson Griffin last year during the season from the Cowboys. It really hasn't worked out at either spot. Maybe they bring him back for a cheap penny. Matt Prater is walking in free agency. Jaron Harmon is going to walk. I don't think they're bringing him back. Okwara's probably getting a solid contract. So this sounds like one of those years where you just let everybody walk away who can walk away, and you try to recoup some money. That's why Tyrol Crosby was kind of a smart move, because 1 year, $6 million, but it doesn't count against your comp pick formula because he was a released free agent, which is why they were able to sign him right now. Jared Davis is leaving, Miles Killebrew. I think they're going to get some comp picks for some of these guys if they sign with the right team and sign with big enough money. I think that's their plan going into next year. There's a reason why Tyrol Williams was the guy who they signed already. I don't think they're going to be big movers in free agency. In fact, I think they're going to be trading some guys. And like I said before, Chase Daniels has already been mentioned for that. Which is why, initially I kind of liked some guys for them, like Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to sign Juju. Although I think Juju paired with Kenny Golladay would be a fun mix. I think they're going to not sign a guy in free agency. I think Juju's going to walk to somebody else, unfortunately. I liked that thought early on, especially when they had Matt Stafford. Now with Jared Goff, although I think that would be a good fit, I think their plan is to try to accumulate picks for next year to try and really rebuild this team and retool it. What I do think they will do in this draft coming up, I think they will trade down. I think they will try to accumulate a few more picks. I think they will try to add to the roster with some real talent. Some guys who I think, they're picking at 7, so if they stay at 7, maybe they take Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, if any of those guys are there. I even think Kyle Pitts is in play because you're not prevented from drafting another tight end, although I'm sure a lot of Lions fans are going to be tired of doing that. This will be the third top 10 tight end where most teams don't take them in the top 10. But I think that it would make sense if you have a plan to utilize those guys. Jalen Waddle, I think, is my favorite to them. If they stay at 7 or they can't find a trade down partner, which I really think they do, I think their plan is to trade down, accumulate picks, especially for next year. Try to build off of build off of the other teams that are desperate for quarterback. The Patriots, the Niners, the teams that want to get up and take a quarterback in this year's draft because this is a deep draft for quarterback. Which means I think they're going to attack wherever they can get talent. So if they are still drafting in the top 15 and they could take one of those top 3 receivers, I think that is golden for them. If not, I think their plan will be to trade back, accumulate picks. Offensive line's not really a super big need. I think everything on defense is a super big need. The only problem is this is not a great defensive draft. It's a solid defensive draft. I wouldn't be shocked if they went Caleb Farley, but I think they like Amani Oruwariye. They also drafted Jeffrey Okudah last year, although, again, new GM, new staff. They could still draft another corner in the first round. It really doesn't hurt them. I think it also depends on what their game plan is at corner and what kind of scheme and system they're looking to do. Say they trade down a couple of other guys on defense. They might want to look at Kwity Paye. If they trade down to like the 15 to 20 area, I think that'd be a fine one. They could still add to the offensive line because you can never have too many good offensive linemen. But like I said before, I think it's the one position that's not a need for them. Pass rusher is a big one. I think if it depends on what their defense is, how much they would value Azeez Ojulari. I like Azeez. I think he's actually, him and Kwity are pretty much tied for first in my favorites as far as pass rushers go. And I kind of like Azeez a little bit more in some regards because even if you run a 4-3, you can set him up in ways to win in a 4-3. Maybe they're willing to take a higher risk guy like a Jalen Phillips in the second round or third round. Depends. He's a little bit more higher risk because of some medical red flags. I think this is a team that really can, in a few years, develop into something. Dan Campbell reminds me a lot of Flores, where we'll see the beginning of next year, and if they're doing really bad initially, we'll be like, I can't believe it, they're doing so bad, and then they'll start to come along. So, let's move on to the next team. The Minnesota Vikings, right? 2021 Minnesota Vikings, they released Kyle Rudolph, freed up $5 million in cap, have $4 million in dead cap. They signed Stephen Weatherly, defensive lineman, formerly of the Minnesota Vikings, but he was also on another team previous to this. Forget who. Carolina Panthers he went to. So they lose. They cut Rudolph. It seems like it wasn't working out. He's also a little bit older. They saved $5 million. They're tight against the cap as well, minus $2 million, and that's if it's at 185. That's a big deal. They can restructure some deals. Adam Thielen, they could probably restructure his deal if they really wanted to. He's got $5 million in dead cap if they release him. He's a $13 million cap hit right now. I'm not saying they will cut him. I'm just saying they have some maneuvers with him, with this roster. They can clear up a little bit of cap space. They did do a little bit of a restructure with Riley Reif to create a little bit of cap room. They have Michael Pierce coming back. They could release him. That's another $2 million. Let's see. Anthony Barr, they could release. They'd save another $7 million. Riley Reif, they would save $13 million if they cut Riley Reif. It doesn't sound like it because they just did a restructure with him. Harrison Smith would save $10 million. Jamar Stephan would save $3.7 million. Michael Pierce would save another $2 million. So they're tight against the cap. I don't think they do most of those moves. So I'm not quite sure what to expect with the Minnesota Vikings. It feels like 2 years in a row they've been up against the cap multiple times. They did lose George Patton, who went over to the Denver Broncos. I don't know how much he would have been involved in these kind of roster construction moves. They do have a couple of free agents. The biggest named one clearly is Anthony Harris, the safety. He did not play as well this year as he did last year. They had franchise tagged him. Todd Davis, George Iloka. Everybody else is not really a big name outside of clearly, Kyle Rudolph. But, again, that was a cut. So, they're losing Anthony Harris. I don't think they're going to be pushed to bring him back again. Vikings are in a weird spot because I don't think they can do much in free agency. They might be, again, like I said before, they might be just more of a sit candidate and just try to draft somebody. Like I said before, I think in the draft I think they're going to go defense heavy in this draft, especially defensive line, maybe offensive line. They've been having a lot of problems in the trenches the last 2 years. Last year they traded for Yannick Ngakoue. They traded their second-round pick and ended up trading him halfway through the season for a third-round pick to the Ravens. I mean, at least you cut bait and you figure out a way to recoup some cost from it. So I don't hate that move, but it didn't. It's one of those things where you go, well, what the heck happened here? And it just was like it was a mess. Anyway, I think they're one of those candidates to take Kwity Paye, maybe a Gregory Rousseau, some big, strong, athletic guys. I'm not quite sure how they feel about. I think I gave them Rousseau in the draft or Kwity Paye. I'm not quite sure how they would feel about Rousseau because he opted out, and his production came against a lot of not great competition. So I get why people feel a little bit questionable about him. So with the Minnesota Vikings, they're kind of in a weird spot. I think they'll attack through the draft, and they'll do what they did last year, and hopefully their roster survives. Gary Kubiak retires. Clint Kubiak becomes their offensive coordinator, his son. So it seems like they're staying within the family tree, as it will. They're going to stick to that outside zone offense. Kirk Cousins is going to be the guy. The good news is they hit on a couple of guys last year in the draft with Justin Jefferson. He ended up playing really well, better than I could have even imagined. And I liked him. I did not have him as high as other people. It was not out of the realm of possibility what he did this year was going to be good, but there were just things that you didn't. Sometimes when you don't see it, you see certain things like why wasn't he being lined up outside? You kind of question it sometimes, and that's just where they put him. Sometimes that's maybe the lesson from Justin Jefferson is just because they're not doing it doesn't mean that that's going to be a hindrance. But on the other end, or just think of where you can play them and play them well. Like, not for nothing, Justin Jefferson, what I did see on tape from him last year was good full body extension, was very good out of the slot, very good route runner. So, again, just because you didn't see him on the outside didn't mean he wasn't going to be able to win on the outside. I know a lot of people made a big stink about him and Rager last year, and that's a whole Eagles thing. We'll talk about the Eagles another day. Green Bay Packers, right? Yes, they're keeping Aaron Rodgers. Yes, that was one of the few things I got right this year. I got a few things right this year. I wasn't horrible on my calls. But Aaron Rodgers, man, I was very high on Aaron Rodgers coming into this year. Which, listen, if you do not, if you think that was a shocker, that's the thing. I think there were a lot of people who were saying Aaron Rodgers was cooked, and I'm like, that's just stupid. Regardless, second year in LaFleur's system. I've told people this before. The second year for quarterbacks in this system, they tend to shine pretty damn well. And he did it this year. And he shined like an MVP. And he did it very well. They started out the offseason with two releases. Christian Kirksey, Rick Wagner, guys who they signed in free agency last year who were releases of their own teams. So Rick Wagner actually played pretty solid. But again, they have to get under the cap. They'll probably attack more offensive line in this upcoming draft. Again, this is a very good class for it. So, releasable candidates, they could release Preston Smith. It didn't sound like he's going to be released, though, from kind of recent reports. Dean Lowry's another guy. They'd save about $3 million. Preston Smith would save $8 million. Devontae Adams, you're not releasing Devontae Adams, but he would save you $13 million. That's never going to happen. He's more of a restructure candidate. Devin Funchess, and also Aaron Rodgers could restructure and save about $9 million. They are estimated, at least as of that moment. Let me pull this up. Yeah, they're still estimated to be $5 million over the cap with the top 51. So they do need to create some space, whether it's some kind of restructure. I think this is again another team that there's not much to say about them going into this offseason. They have Aaron Jones. There's actually been rumors that they might look into franchise tagging Aaron Jones. There was a little bit of a statement about that not too long ago. Yes, Gutekunst said on Tuesday that the franchise tag is an option for impending free agent Aaron Jones. They're losing Corey Linsley. He's expected to hit the free market. I think he's going to be a big candidate for a contract for a center-needy team. They got rid of Mike Pettin. He's no longer there. I don't think they really upgraded with Joe Barry. We'll see what he's going to be able to do as the defensive coordinator. Listen, it couldn't be any worse than when you put Kevin King on an island and you could have been running a different coverage. I just think Pettin's a little bit hard-headed. When he's good, he's very good. When he's bad, he's not that great. So I'm not a huge fan of him overall. But regardless, this is, again, another one of those teams where you go, it doesn't matter what they do. They have Aaron Rodgers. They have a solid offense. I think they have to look at receiver in this draft, although we said that last year, and they said, fuck it, we don't care what you say. You want to say receiver? We're going to go ahead and draft a running back and a quarterback. But if they were smart, they would maybe attack corner. They're losing Kevin King in free agency. Maybe they go after I think corner, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, all are on the table going into this free agency. Outside of that, there's not a lot to really say about the Packers because it's Aaron Rodgers. I think it's the one upside about being it's the one downside about being a Packers fan is that you really don't get to talk much in the offseason, right? If you're a Packers fan, they don't do much in the offseason. They have that 1 year where they sign Preston and Za'Darius. I think this might be one of the few times they do actually restructure deals because it's not a thing for the Packers. It's not really been part of their team identity, but it seems like everybody this year is going to be doing avoidable options in the back of contracts to clear up some cap space because, again, cap's crunching and you got to do something about it. So, anyway, dude, that was the NFC North. It felt like the other teams were a little bit, like the front. I front loaded the hard teams because those are the teams that had a lot more going on, right? Changes in defensive coordinator actually a lot of these teams at least had one coach change, right? Some rumors with the Bears as far as Allen Robinson and their D coordinator. There was a little bit of a mention that Alex Smith, the recently released Alex Smith, could land with the Bears. Don't think that's totally ridiculous. Just don't know how much money they really have, and if why do you want to keep sticking these like aging vets who, again, he would not play great this year. Supposedly the Bears never really made an offer for Wentz. Just these are all kind of reports that came in with some of these teams. But yeah, end of the day, I'm kind of excited. I think it's the Packers, and then everybody else is kind of playing catch-up right now. It doesn't matter how much the Packers need to fix things. These other three teams are all in very bad spaces, right? So, Vikings defense started coming along. Shockingly, I think, didn't they beat the Packers at one point in the second game they played? So, I think they'll attack defense in this draft. I think they'll go defensive line, which is not really the greatest move. It's not the best defensive line class. Their corners started playing pretty well towards the end of the year, especially the guy, Cam Dantzler, who they drafted in the third round. He started playing up pretty well. They will get Danielle Hunter back. He might be a trade candidate. I don't think they're going to cut him, but I think there were some rumblings that maybe they would trade him because he's looking to get a better deal. I don't know if that's really the case. I don't know. NFC North, it's the Packers. It's the Packers, and then some of these teams are just trying to wait out until Aaron Rodgers is gone. Anyway, follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of the laugh punch. A delicious drink you drink in the summer. Follow, subscribe. We will be doing more of these. It's going to be at least the next 7 days. There's going to be a whole bunch of them. I'll back to doing them weekly. I guess I have a new computer, whole new setup, new everything. No, not new everything. New hat, if you could see. New beard. No, it's the same beard, just kind of grown out a little bit more. But thank you.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the future.